Good. Hey, honey. Please behave yourself. Remember, darling, I'm having such a hard time, and I don't want you to fuss at me or say anything you shouldn't say in the middle of all of this, all right? Oh, me. Good to see all of you out there. Let's pray together. Pray for these women that they'll honor God in everything they say. They'll answer the right way. I've been hearing about some of these sessions they've been preaching in. Dr. Tom Malone said the most difficult thing about preaching is living up to your own preaching. So I'm going to try to be the head of my house. But my wife is the neck, and when the neck turns, the head moves, you know what I mean? Let's pray together, may we? Dear Lord God, we thank you for this wonderful, joyous opportunity and for the work of thy Spirit in our hearts. And we give thee glory for it. Help us to enjoy this evening. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Mr. Tomlinson, you're the man who's going to torture us, and then we will wait anxiously on the questions.
All right, question number 1 is this. What is your love story? How did you meet and grow to love one another?
Is that to each of us or me? Beginning with the Sextons? Well, I had transferred to Everett High School in Maryville, Tennessee. Evelyn had gone to a county school and came there. I'd gone to a city school. I was in my sophomore year, and I stood up. No. I think it was a freshman year. The freshman year, I stood up. I was sitting in a study hall, a large auditorium study hall, down front, right in front of the professor because he loved me and he wanted me near him. Now, these two other mean boys were sitting on either side of me, and I was there to make sure they did the right thing. And I turned around and I saw this angel stand up in the back in a white dress. This was shortly after the summer had ended. Beautiful, dark complexion, dark brown hair, beautiful brown eyes. And I hit Charles Docker, who sat beside me, and I said, "Doc, who is that angel standing up back there?" And he said, "I'm going to tell you something. You better get that off your mind because her brother is a holy terror, and he'll give you the worst time you ever imagined. That's his sister, and he watches out for her." Well, I found out later her brother was just a charming little pussycat about the whole thing. Sweet guy, lovely, wonderful man. Really, I loved the guy. Greatest brother-in-law in the world now. But Doc lived across the road from her, and he was madly in love with her all his life. He told everybody that strange story. Now, I didn't have a car. My mother didn't have a car. We walked to town. I'm going to let Evelyn tell you how she discovered me.
Well,
Get excited about it, honey. Build yourself up a little.
you've heard of streetwalkers. He was walking on Main Street down Broadway in Maryville, Tennessee, and I saw him, and I was with one of my girlfriends, and I said, "You see that boy right there? I'm going to marry him." And I did.
You see, God worked from the beginning of time, from creation, in his providential work to bring us together, and immediately we knew at one glance, that's it.
What's so hard to believe is that was...
I don't think they're going to turn her on.
What's so hard to believe is that was over 50 years ago. So it's not been without heartache and trial, but it's been with
Whoa.
lots of joy. It's been with lots of joy and lots of the Lord's blessings.
Well, let's let Professor Campbell tell us about how they met.
Kay was in a women's prison. Almost on,
You have to hold it up close, buddy.
she was on death row. And I will pay for this. I had finished my college at Auburn University and was in between going to professional school and was offered a interim research position at Georgia Tech. And she was attending a small Bible college, and they asked me to teach a part-time chemistry class. And before I left, I agreed to that, and she took my class, and there was chemistry. And she ended up dropping the class, and we... No, she did not fail chemistry. This...
To hold the mic, they can't hear you if you don't hold it closer.
If they can't hear me, I will stay in less trouble. And my mouth gets me in so much trouble. I got out of the car the other day where I park at the hospital. Lady came up to me and she said, "Can you direct me to Dr. Campbell's office?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, but you won't like him." I said, "Most arrogant fool I've ever met." And before I could fix it, she turned around and walked away. And I stood there and I said, "I need to stop doing that." However, I left and came to Louisville to go to school and told my mom and dad, I said, "I think I found the young lady I would like to marry." And that was almost 31 years ago.
That's a sweet story.
And,
Can we keep them all on so I can interject here, honestly? And I mean, the women like to talk to and interrupt people. We can keep them on. Kay, tell us about it. I don't think we can keep them on. Go ahead.
Not much different. He was my chemistry teacher, and we didn't get married right away, though. He ended up proposing and was leaving shortly to go to Louisville to start professional school. And I stayed in Atlanta and taught school another year, and then he came back and he swept me off my feet and took me with him, and we've been in love ever since.
Oh, that's so sweet. It really is. It's just sweet. Sweet. Sweet, sweet. Tell us about it there, sweet Eddie.
Yeah, it's all downhill from here. We grew up, of course, in the youth group together, and I was in my sophomore year of high school, and she was in her 8th grade year of junior high, and a friend of ours said, "You know what? My sister's got a friend that you ought to consider dating." As much as we dated back then, it wasn't quite like it even is now, but it's. I saw her in church for the first time, and I thought, "Wow, she's pretty," and asked her to sit with me if you.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. You don't want, if they're ugly, you don't want to start out that way, And
She did.
she did. It doesn't matter. That part doesn't matter. So we dated for a year. We went down to the Bill Rice Ranch, as our youth group did, and God spoke to my heart and said we ought to break up for a while, and had nothing to do with the other pretty girl that was at camp. It was God's will. And so we, yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. But anyhow, we broke up for a year or so, and then she was in a terrible car accident. Oh, your sophomore? Freshman year, and school was breaking for Christmas break, and terrible snow, and her car she was in of kids going to school was hit by a car, and the driver was killed. The girl that her her girlfriend that ran for one of the seats in the car, was on the way home from school. And girl beat her to the seat, and that girl's just broke about every bone in her body and was in a coma. She broke her jawbone and her pelvic bone, and so it was a real bad accident. It was a bad night. But go ahead.
When I was in the hospital that night, my mom had come up, and then she went home later that night. And I called her up later, and I said, "Mom, you'll never guess who came to see me at the hospital." And she said, "Brother Hiles." I said, "No, it was Eddie Lapina."
So that's how it really happened.
That's how it happened. And that's it.
Well, Evelyn and I started out, and then we weren't really, you can't be too sweet and lovey-dovey at that age. I mean, honestly. And anyway, no, but what
He
happened?
dropped me for another girl.
It's God's will. It was God's
Everybody
will.
has to come to their senses. But you know what
Amen.
happened? Look. I married her, and the boy she was dating married the last girl I was dating, and the boy, let's see, how does this go? Anyway, it's over, right? It's over, but I'm working my way back to you, babe, all the way through, so that's the way it was all going. What's another question? Here we go.
When husband and wife have a very busy schedule, what are some practical suggestions for making time for one another and staying in touch?
Well, my wife's father was killed in an automobile accident when she was 5 years old. He was a Baptist preacher, and my wife and her mother were at home making a cake for him, and they thought when the door rang or was coming open that he was coming home, but it was someone coming to tell them that he was not coming home. He'd been killed in a car accident, struck by a bus, and would die in the hospital. And my parents had a rough life together. My mother was 22 years younger than my father, and they managed to hold a marriage together for 14 years. I was 12 years old, the oldest of 4 children, when they divorced. I only wanted one thing, a Christian home. That's all. That's all. I told Evelyn that when we were older and I was serving the Lord and yielded to the Lord, and I said, I want a Christian home. That's all I want. I didn't know what I was going to be, but I thought I was always going to be a coach. But I said, I want a Christian home. So I think our upbringing affected a lot of the things about our lives. We said we don't have one day to waste. We try to part every morning with tenderness and I love you and love you. We communicate during the day. We plan the day around one another. I have an opportunity that not everybody has as a pastor of the church. I've been in the ministry since I was 18. So my life and life schedule is planned around what God's given me to do, and the number one thing God's given me to do on earth is to be her husband. So she's included in everything, every thought. She knows where I am during the day. I know where she is during the day. If we make time to talk to one another. And we had a little rule in our house, even when our kids were young, and they stopped everything when I came home. They greeted me at the door. It wasn't because I was demanding about the thing, honestly. We just wanted it that way. And family was so important. And so still to this day, our children have grown and gone, have wonderful families of their own. One of my sons is a missionary in Germany with his family. My other son is here with his wife. And beautiful family, both of them, thank God. The Lord's doing. But she stops what she's doing. She'll greet me and welcome me home. And we just enjoy seeing one another, and we want to make the most of it. And so communicating during the day, if you can't do all that, you've got everything imaginable today, text and that type of thing. I still like writing little notes and leaving for her for certain places. And I think you just have to work at it constantly. The easiest person in the world to take for granted is the person you say you love the most. So it takes an effort. It really takes an effort. And my personality is different from hers. You know, I want it over quickly, and let's get on with it. And so we had an argument. Let's forget it, and you know, and it doesn't always work that way. So we're just trying to learn one another and enjoy the journey. We're having a lot of fun. We still enjoy one another. I'd rather be with her than anywhere in the world. I'd rather travel with her than any other person in the world. And no matter where I am speaking, I'd rather be with her than where I am in that place, wherever it is. And I believe with all of my heart she knows that. And I think the same thing's true of her. Probably the biggest mistake we've made is we haven't given one another maybe the room that she needed. I don't know. I guess I've just been so selfish about that, you know, because she's a constant companion, travels with me when I speak, and we love that. Made a big baby out of me for all these years. So we try to stay in touch. I mean, communicate, you know, that's it. And we believe we have to get over everything. We don't want the sun going down in our wrath. That's kept us up pretty late at night some nights, but we have to work at it. I think honestly, it's not finding, you know, Evelyn was the prettiest girl in high school, and I went to a big high school, over 2,000 students. I think she's the most popular girl in the whole wide world, and I feel very fortunate that she's my wife. I still think she's the most beautiful woman in the world, inside and out. But you don't find the right person, you become the right person. And I'm still working at it. I'm still working at it. The greatest intimacy that we have had is the intimacy that we've had in the last few years dealing with all these health things, where my wife has had to at times even bathe my body that I couldn't do things for myself. And you never think that when you get older you can get closer and closer and closer, but honestly you can grow closer. And it is better. Ed Reese said to me, sitting on a park bench, he was married to his wife 60 years, and he said, you know, I want to tell you something. It's going to get better. I know you love Evelyn. I said, I do. And he said, it's going to get better. And he's right. He's in heaven tonight, but he's right. And it can. It really can. Eddie, why don't you take?
My wife and I, we dated. One of the things that really were latter part of high school, actually I think I was in college, she was still in high school. We were on some kind of activity, and I just remember how much fun we had together. And anything that you do where you enjoy it a lot, you do it a lot. The class in school that you enjoyed, the teacher that you enjoyed, you did well in that class. We just enjoyed being together. We had fun together. We still do.
Good.
Whatever activity we're at, church we're at, you know, where our kids are, we enjoy having a great time with our kids. My son works construction. Sometimes he'll stop by the house early in the morning and have a cup of coffee and make us laugh, and we enjoy that. We enjoy laughing. I honestly, to this day, I've never met anybody that doesn't like my wife. I don't think she has an enemy in the world. I've got more than enough for both of us, but she doesn't have any. And you know, it's just because of her spirit and her nature. But I think the home is supposed to be a fun place. At our dinner table, we laughed, we cut up, we had a great time. Our family gatherings now with grandkids, they're always enjoyable, always fun. And so when you're enjoying it, you know, finding time for each other just it makes it itself.
Amen.
You don't have to find time, it's there.
Dr. Campbell, you're a very busy man, very busy. I don't know anybody any more busier than you are, so how do you find time for this?
Excellent question. Because I get up early and a lot of times come home late, and every now and then car wrecks and things like that throw a real kink in my day. So I do several things. Every so often I take an entire day off, and we call it the K Day. And we do whatever she wants, within reason. I said that once, and this wasn't her, it was my daughter. I did the same thing with her. She goes, great, let's get a massage. I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And we have dinner almost every night, unless there's a problem. We exercise together. And then we do something a little strange. Should I tell him? Okay. On a regular basis, we live out in the country, and we go outside and just lay down on the driveway. And the stars are breathtaking, and we have sleeping bags, and we just talk,
That's great.
watch the stars. I think she drops grapes in my mouth. That may have been in a dream. My mind's not what it used to be.
Save us, Inquisitor.
This question is for married couples who are in the ministry. How involved do you allow your wife to be in the ministry, and do you keep some things from her in order to protect her?
Well, I think these are capable women up here. I know my wife is a very capable woman. You know, my mother raised 4 children basically by herself. My mother was out in front, get it done, supported her family as a waitress, waiting as a waitress. She'd come home from the day, hard day, crying sometimes because of the way people treated her. It wasn't her fault the cook messed up, but, you know, she caught it. And she came home with an apron every night filled with tips. And she would keep the apron tied together with the apron string, and after my brother and 2 sisters had gone to bed, we'd go to the kitchen table, put the money out, and put all the quarters together, all the nickels together, all the dimes together, and we counted the money, and that's how we basically lived. And people think, you know, that's just not, that's wonderful. You know, people like to have stories like that to tell, but it really did happen that way. But my mother suffered as a child, was abused by her stepfather, and then married a man who had no clue about anything. His mother disappeared. His father was killed. His grandfather was killed. They were shipped off to homes. He wound up in a reform school, what later went to prison, got out of prison at age 27 and met my mother when he was 42, and she, or 40 and she was 18. And then their marriage busted up after, and it was turbulent during that time. She was a person with a lot of problems. And I wanted to help her. And I just couldn't stand to think that someone would mistreat her. And I think as a minister of the gospel, God unconsciously prepares you. No one has the same preparation. I'm talking about ministry. No one has the same preparation. But there's a conscious preparation. You know, you go to school. I went to college and went to seminary, went to a junior college in the University of Tennessee, graduated there and went to seminary. And Evelyn made some tremendous sacrifices. I mean, I used to cheat off her papers in high school. That's the only way I got through. She was so good at it all. But she made tremendous sacrifices for me. And I have this, I don't want her hurt. And I can be overbearing about that. She's capable. Our people love her. If something happens to me, that'd be bad. But if something happened to her, they just feel, that's terrible. But I think you have a natural tendency to protect in the ministry. And sometimes that's inhibiting. But I like to say that I don't want her in the position where she would take the bullet. If somebody wants to get even with something or come at me about something, now she'd like to jump in front of me and do it. But you have this feeling as a man, and you know, people today have gotten the idea that that's belittling to a woman, you know. I mean, I've heard women say the worst kinds of things. No man's going to out, and then they name, no man's going to out. Well, you know, honestly, God did create male and female, and there are wonderful things we can do together. I don't know that we can keep people happy today in an audience like this with one answer, because some people think she ought to be out front doing everything. But you're talking about the minister's home. So I'm talking about as a minister. You're dealing with problems and people's problems constantly. There's always confusion. There's always misunderstanding. People don't get it straight. And I try to keep my wife out of it so I can have a home. She really wants to solve all the problems, but I don't want her to solve all the problems. I depend on her to help me, and she does, in an amazing way. But if anybody really knew, and some of these men and women who've worked with us really know how we operate, I guess the whole sum of the thing is I'm trying to be her husband, she's trying to be my wife, and we happen to be in the ministry. And those husbandly things are things I do to try to protect her. Maybe you could say something. I don't know if that's what you want in an answer, or that's what the question is about, but I really do think a lot of preachers' wives and ministry wives get themselves in some trouble sometimes by getting out in the front of the parade, and honestly, it's not necessary.
Well, I think it is a wifey thing that we want to know everything. I mean, you know, if he's not going to tell me, why is he not telling me? But he does confide in me with lots of things, and he has made this statement that he never makes a decision in regards to the ministry without consulting me and without praying with me about it. He does shelter me, and he does protect me, because, you know, if somebody goes after your husband, you know, you turn into a wildcat. So he doesn't really want me to know everything that goes on. There's a fine line there, but I know that God guides him in that direction. So I just trust in his decisions.
I've said thousands of times, I'll have to pray about that, and they know I will pray, but I'm going to ask my wife, my son, or my other son, or both sons. I'm going to seek. We all need counselors and people we know that are looking out for our best interest. They're not in it for themselves. They're not trying to get something out of it. And that's what Evelyn is. You know, she would never make a decision to promote her over my good. And that's a trusted thing. You know, all these decision-making processes are anchored in something that is bedrock. That's why you need to work at your marriage in the trust component, make the deposits that ought to be made there, because that's not just going to help you at one moment of decision. It's going to help you all of your life. Now, Eddie's in the ministry, and Dr. Campbell is sort of a doctor with ministry and a minister with doctor skills, and he may want to speak to this, but something about, they said for ministers. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, just, I thought you said it very, very well. Just when you're in the ministry, you want to bring some things home but you can't always, because, you know, your home is your haven. And as I've already said, you know, I want a good spirit when I come home. I want to be involved in a good spirit. But when our kids were young and she had a lot going on, I tried my best to keep a lot of it from her. But now that our kids are gone and so forth, I have found, and I wish I would have used her a whole lot more back then, but to do exactly what Brother Sexton said, is seek her advice. God has given her a tremendous an ability to see things, you know, in a unique way, and to be very helpful and to give good advice. Also, anything, this is very important to me, and I think it's very important in every ministry, she's not a gossip. And so anything that we talk about or an issue that we're dealing with, I know it's not going to be on Facebook. It's not going to be told to her best friend. It's not going to be told to her mom, and it's between us. And that gives me a lot of confidence in her that I can tell her just about anything and know it's going to stay there. And we do pray about it, and we seek the Lord. But I agree with everything Brother Sexton said.
Thank you. I want Dr. Campbell to speak to something. I'm sure Tim may have another question. But we have not always been what you see sitting here. You know, people say to me sometimes, I'm sure you get anything you want. Well, that's not true. And you think about Dr. Campbell, he's a renowned surgeon. He has a lovely place to live. But it wasn't always that way in their marriage, you know. I remember visiting them in the projects when they lived there. I'm just kidding, but anyway. Well, I was in the house they lived in before this one. But the fact is, I want him to speak. You know, there are principal things in marriage that money don't buy. There are things that you have that are intrinsic things that become a part of your marriage that you don't just, not things you're trying to finally afford. They're part of who you are. So why don't you talk like you did when you were 30, you know?
Sure. A very good question. I was lecturing in a different state, and I had the condo that we first moved in. It was 700 feet. That included the closets. And it was unbelievably small, incredibly poorly built. It was terrible. We moved from there to another house that we lived in for 11 years. And then I saved my pennies, and we now live out on 70 acres on an absolutely stunning place that is a dream home that I've always wanted to build. And I'm going somewhere. I asked her, I showed her pictures of all three. I said, where were you happy? She said, since I've married you, I've never known happiness. And I thought, that doesn't help my talk. No, the truth of the matter, she said, I was just as happy there
Exactly.
as I was there as I am here. It has nothing to do with the bricks, the mortar, nothing. And I've taught young physicians, I said, listen, if you're not happy now, you're just not going to be happy. If you think square footage will increase your happiness, you're grossly mistaken. And so we have so enjoyed the journey. There was times when I was in medical school that we walked to Shoney's. We paid $5 and split a meal, drank water. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we were happy. And now there's times that, you know, for this Christmas, she said, I want a new car. I didn't buy a new car. I got her a diamond ring instead because you can't buy fake new cars. And, it was a joke.
Yeah, Kay, did you know what you were getting yourself into? Question.
This question says, my wife and I are now in the empty nest part of life. What suggestions do you
Hallelujah. That's why Kay gave her lecture today. Whatever this lecture happens to be, they've all just been grinning all day long. But the fact is, the empty nest syndrome. Well, let me tell you the truth about my feelings about it. Our first son, who's here, went off to college. We were living in Patterson, New Jersey. Evelyn said, I'm not going to cry. I said, okay. But I am. She said, well, you take him 700 miles to school and then come on back. Flew down, left him in college, went to the airport, and a friend of mine came by through the airport and said, Brother Sexton, what's the matter with you? Have you had a death? I said, no, I just left my son at college. And he said, that's wonderful. And I looked at him and said, you don't have children, do you? You know, you go through a transition. You think you can't live with them, you can't live without them, and you can't live with them, then you can't live without them, and then you can't live with them, then you can't live without them, and maybe you had a good time for a little while, and you think, I can't live without them. And then you have to learn. God made them to grow up and become men and women, and you better have something that's gone on with you and your wife, or your wife and your husband, other than just the common mutual love you share for your children. And if you think about that, think about it. What kind of relationship you've built with their mother or with their father, because you're going to be staring one another in the face for a longer period of time than you haul the kids around. And that doesn't mean you neglect them, but that's why you deal with things in a marriage conference like this, to be able to have the joy and love God meant for every season of life to be the golden era. He meant for every season in life to be the golden era. Meaning, when they arrive as little babies, when they grow up as toddlers, when they start walking. Evelyn and I sitting on the floor and having them learn their first steps and catching them back and forth. When you see their natural bent and you think, I'm going to help them develop that. And all the struggles you go through, teaching the character lessons and trying to be there, watching them become, in our case, young men, and knowing there's a change going on. I certainly hope they'll become the kind of young men that'll be able to lead a family and support their family and these kinds of things. Honestly, the empty nest syndrome can be just a golden era in your marriage, because you can thank God for what the Lord's allowed you to do with your children, and now what He's allowed you to have with one another. Now, I'm sure these men, they've gone through the same thing, married children, but I'm sure they can add something to it. But it's not a downer. You still love them. You love to see them. Have you seen the commercial when the grandkids come and you bring all your equipment out and dump it in their hands, all your stuff that won't work, and say, I'm so happy you're here. We're so glad to see you. Can you fix the iPad? Do you know how this works? And this kind of thing. That's been very helpful for us. Anything you'd like to add?
No, you did a fine job.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I've said to you about the surgery.
Yes. Yes.
Look, the scar's gone almost. But the trauma lingers on.
I will determine the size of catheter you get. So,
Please! Please! Please!
you... I did not start this.
If you start
But
it,
I
you
do-
can't win it.
Yeah.
All right. There's a truce.
We are empty nesters. It has been delightful. There's, the pains. You miss them for the first 15 minutes. And that we've had a wonderful time together. I have a slide on this, and tonight we're going to talk about it.
Well, we can maybe hold that till then.
Whatever you want to do.
I'm afraid of what he's going to say next. He scares me. He scares me. He scares me, honey. I'm thankful that you're between us. Is there something you'd like to add? We have another one.
I know
last
one thing for
question.
sure. Never argue with your barber or your surgeon. It's not going to go well for you. No. Just have a lot of fun when the kids move out, because one day your mother-in-law will move back in.
And my 94-year-old mother-in-law lives with us. Someone said the other day, do you all live close together? I said, oh, maybe
Live that long?
about 12 feet
94?
from one another. 94.
They live that long?
They live that long. How old is yours? And they're living longer and longer and longer. Dr. Campbell, how many people today are alive that are over 100 years old, alive at one time?
None that I've operated.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. Do something to enjoy yourself, all right? Thank you.